Day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Quinn Buckland, and you are watching Books vs. Films. Today, I'm going to be covering I, Robot. I do have to mention spoiler alert as I go through the story, characters, and general breakdown of both the books and the film. I, Robot was a collection of stories by Isaac Asimov that had been published in the magazines Super Science Stories and Astounding Science Fiction. In 1950, the stories were brought together to become a full novel explaining the history of robotics in Asimov's fictional universe. In 2004, 20th Century Fox created a $120 million film based off the story collection/novel. The film was directed by Alex Proyas, written by Jeff Venter and Akiva Goldsman, and starring Will Smith, Bridget Moyan, and Alan Tudyk. Which one's better? Well, to give you an honest assessment, I need to break down both the book and the film. But first, let's look at the stories for both of them. The book, as I mentioned before, is a collection of short stories connected by a few characters in the premise that they are stories being told by an old Susan Calvin to a young man interviewing her about the history of robotics. It starts with the genesis of robots and humanity. An RB series robot named Robbie, by his adoptive family, is friends with their child. The father doesn't really care about the robot, and he sees it as a form of status to have the mechanical human in his house. His wife, on the other hand, believes them to be dangerous. She badgers her husband until he finally gives in and gets rid of it. When the family moves to New York, the child continues to search for her long-lost friend. Once she finds Robbie, he saves her life, and the wife begrudgingly allows him to return to their place. The book continues on from the point of view of two scientists and their several adventures. The first story deals with an SPD-type robot, otherwise known as Speedy, as it becomes drunk from a massive confliction between the three laws. Their second story deals with a QT-1 robot, or Cutie as they call it. It uses reason to believe that there is a robot god that created him and the humans are inconsequential towards his being. And their third adventure deals with a DV5 robot, known as Dave, who stops producing the ore that he was designed to mine with no explanation as to why. Next, we end up following Susan Calvin, who is much younger in the story, who has to figure out what is going on with the HB-34 style robot, or Herbie as they call him, a robot capable of reading minds, but lies about everything that he's asked. In Susan's second story, she has to find an NS2 robot, otherwise known as Nestor, who was told to get lost and did so efficiently. And it eventually comes to the point where she is inspecting a robot that has to figure out what is wrong with some massive positronic brains that are disallowing humans to go into hyperspace. And it all comes with a close, with a politician and his decision and rewriting of the first law to read that no robot can harm humanity, thus bringing on a global enslavement of the human race from the oppressive robot rule. One of the more fascinating aspects of iRobot is the three laws of robotics. A robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given it by human beings, except for where such orders would conflict with the first law. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. The stories in this book show and explain the robot's problems and eventual exploitation of the three unbreakable laws. From Robbie, the emotional robot whose child friend refuses to let him go, to Cutie, who develops a form of robotic religion due to an unshakable level of reasoning, to Herbie, who must continuously lie to obey the first law, all the way to Stephen Byerly, the man who the public is unsure on whether or not he is man or machine. What makes iRobot incredible is the sake that even though it's a short story collection, it still has the feel of a novel. The reporter asking the questions of a very old Susan Calvin between the tales gives the story a level of fluidity. The characters, though some of them are only in it for a chapter or a story or two, are very well rounded. The main character, Susan Calvin, was a very likable woman who you learned was smarter than many of her colleagues, but only due to the sake that she chose to understand their psychology. Powell and Donovan, the two scientists, are also very important characters early on in the book, as they deal with some real problems. The characters in this book are forced to use their smarts to outwit the smarter constructs. They have to figure out where the three laws have holes and the problems that arise from these holes, and just how they are going to fix it. Though they do eventually figure everything out in the story, It kind of shows the blunders they make as well as figuring out the causes of these problems. For what it is, though, it does have its flaws. Since the stories were written in the 1940s and 50s, some of the conversations and technology they refer to is a little dated, as well as the reactions to the robots. The assumption of the speedy propulsion of technology was a common assumption in the 50s. In this book, we have robots in the 90s mining for selenium by 2015, hyperspace travel by the 2030s, and robot overlords by 2052. Is the rush technology just nitpicking? Yeah, however, even though it's science fiction, I couldn't help but laugh at some of the dates and how much technology they have in comparison to what we have in real life. The film begins with Detective Del Spooner waking up, working out, and going to his grandmother's place for a pie. On his way to work, he spots a robot running with a purse. Naturally, nobody else seems concerned about it. In fact, everybody's ignoring this robot, but not Del Spooner. He chases after the robot, who turns out to be fetching a purse for its owner. This causes him to be laughed at in the streets and at the police station. He's soon called to the scene of a suicide of Dr. Lanning. Here he meets Dr. Calvin, and upon further investigation encounters the robot Sonny. Sonny escapes after Del believes it to be the killer, but not before getting a bullet in the leg. They follow Sonny to a factory featuring hundreds of his kind. When Sonny is captured, he is interrogated and discovers that Sonny is capable of emotions. From there, Spooner continues to be attacked by robots, only to show that he has a robotic arm from when a robot saved him from a submerged car. The robot was also shown to have left a younger girl to die in the second submerged car. Spooner continues his investigation regardless of being stripped of duty and encounters the robots attempting to take away human freedoms for their own safety. Though a series of events that can only be described as what the fuck moments as they finally take down the AI that controlled the robots, Sonny was deemed innocent and Spooner for some reason decided to change his view on robots, despite nearly being killed by them several times. I was familiar with the title I, Robot before the film. With that said, I was actually kind of excited to see it. And I became more and more excited that when I saw that it was starring Will Smith. Once I saw the movie, I couldn't help but feel disappointed. I still enjoyed it mildly, but I didn't think it was overly great. It was good enough for me not to bash it, but bad enough that I wouldn't buy it. And then I read the book. This was the first performance by Will Smith that I didn't like, but it wouldn't be the last. This movie was nothing more than Will Smith stroking his ego with some robots added into it. But, of course, of all people in the world, he was the only one who didn't like robots. He was the only one who liked the old vintage stuff. He was the only one who chose to drive manually instead of going on autopilot. He was the only one who saw the robots' uprising coming. He was the only one who could stop the robots. You see where I'm going with this? The story had almost no similarity to the book, although it did have the impending robot overlord and a few other mild themes. It held little resemblance to its source material. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm always up for an artistic interpretation of a book, but it still has to have the standard story. It needs to keep the feel of the story. The Shining was an artistic retelling of the book. Stephen King hated it, but it didn't change the fact that it was still good. The acting was really bland. The character of Susan Calvin was hanged drastically. She went from the slightly snarky but very intelligent robot psychologist to being less than interesting cookie-cutter supporting female role. Spooner, who is not a character in Asimov's book, was a typical Will Smith character. I think I explained that fairly well enough above. The only character that I enjoyed, and actually still enjoyed with my latest viewing of it, was the robot Sonny. Though he didn't really mention any of the robots in the book of I, Robot, he still felt kind of like an Asimov-style robot. The writers showed they didn't really understand the three laws fully either when they wrote the script. I mean, they let a girl die by drowning and save Spooner. A person who has actually put 5 minutes of thought into this can actually say that the robots would have pulled Spooner out and then gone after the girl. It wouldn't have let her die. There's nothing saying that the girl would have lived, but through inaction, the girl died, which would have been impossible for the robot. The first law even countermands the second and third laws, meaning that the robot would put itself in harm's way to save her. The biggest problem is that it wasn't supposed to have anything to do with Asimov's story to begin with. It was supposed to be a movie titled Hardwired, and it was supposed to be an Agatha Christie-style murder mystery, which in my opinion would have been infinitely more entertaining than what we got. The problem was that Disney got their hands on it and changed the story, characters, and title, ignoring the fact that the story is more of a reproduction of Asimov's Cave of Steel. They should have chose to say it's based off of iRobot, going so far as to take its title as well. But for all my griping, it's really not all bad. It's certainly not the worst film I've ever seen. The visuals are nice to look at, and the robot designs, though unoriginal, are still really neat. The world they live in was pretty cool, and I would have liked to have seen some of what makes the world the way it is. I think the film had a world of potential, but due to some poor casting and lazy screenwriting, it became a lame summer blockbuster. For the most part, I, Robot is a magnificent book that is worth a read. Is it worth a second read? Yeah, I'd say so. It definitely hides a lot of themes while holding other themes out on its sleeve. iRobot is a testament to the question of technology and how it will become an integral part of our lives whether we like it or not. The movie iRobot was a bit of a waste of time, but enjoyable if you choose to not think too much about the characters, the plot, or anything else about it. As long as you're there for the Will Smith ego trip, action scenes, and some pretty cool effects, you should have no problem enjoying this movie. I have to say, the winner is the book. The movie was just too stupid. While the movie is nice to look at, that is really its only redeeming factor. The book will make you think and guess how they are going to solve each of its problems. There was just no way the movie could have competed against a book like this. Be sure to tune in next week when I cover The Count of Monte Cristo. And if there's any comparisons that you would like to see, let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, the comment section, subscribe, and yeah, stay tuned. The Count of Monte Cristo, it's a classic book. You never know which one's going to be better.